So I mentioned in a former video that I set up various profiles and kill them so that I don't have two accounts going at once because these websites have a prohibition on that. What I'm doing, I think is legal and makes people happy. So uh, one of the profiles I had was where I play f5 or an f4 on every move. You know, f4 for white, f5 for black against absolutely everything. And I've discovered I can get over 2100 in blitz doing that in a fairly short order. In fact, in like 16 games or less. And so I thought, well, what would happen if I played f6 or f3 on the opening of every single thing? And all I can do is tell you that I got up to like 16 plus games, and I wasn't at 2100, but they weren't giving me very good opponents, and it was slow going. I had draws and an early loss. So this is one of these games. I discovered what could possibly be the worst opening in chess, and I know it's called something, and I don't know what, and I had no idea what I was playing because I thought I was actually making it up. And it's very possible that I did make this up, but no doubt in chess somebody's played this before and called it something. And even if they had called it something, you know, the Russians or somebody would have renamed it. So I finally found the worst defense in chess, and it involves, let's say you're playing black. No matter what they move, you move f6. And on the second move, you move king to f7. Of course, it's impossible if they move bishop to c4 after e4 or something like that, so you can't do it every single time, but that's the idea. This type of thing should be used for defensive practice only. Now you say, well, this is complete nonsense. You know, this is a ridiculous waste of time, and why teach me something as horrible as this? Well, I'll tell you in the game I'm going to show you. You know, I played somebody who was rated just shy of 2100, which was one of the higher people they allowed me to play during this short string of games that I tried, where I also opened white as f3 and moved king to f2. The fact is that it drives the other side crazy. They sit there and they lose on time sometimes. They're just trying to figure out what can possibly be done. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the person I lost to was using a computer, because they played a lot better than anybody. They had absolutely no errors in their game. So, and they weren't rated that high. And that's something that I've noted in another video yet. But it can be used as white, and this is for defensive practice. So I'm going to show you this game, and be ready for some pain, because it's a pretty disgusting game. So let me unpause the engine, because this is going to be the interesting part. Now, of course, it says d5, move f6. And the engine says as soon as I move f6, I'm down 1. Okay. Now they just move e4, which is perfectly logical. Well, interesting. The computer wants me to transfer into an e6 or c6 type Caro-Kann or French type formation, and I move my king. So moving the king only puts me down another fifth of a point. Well, this is kind of an obscene type of opening if you're a decent chess player. It looks like you're walking into some sort of strange fool's mate, and it has a kind of unnerving effect on people, especially after they lose to this. So here's the check. It's kind of irresistible. Monkey sees check, monkey gives check. So we block the check rather than move our king again. And this person pushes, and it turns out pushing is a decent move. Now, for some reason, the computer wants me to play bishop to d6, which is pretty interesting. And the reason for that is, and it's probably not that horrible a move in this situation, is now all of a sudden there's a pin on the queen. You know, after 2-3 moves, pawn takes pawn is actually threatened, because if I take back, I lose my queen. So I got to do something about that, and this caused me to burn some time, which was kind of upsetting, so I covered my queen. Now, you know, I have no scope and no hope of development and no center presence, and I'm down 1.3. And now the person moved knight to e2, which I thought, well, that's a very interesting, maybe accurate move. I mean, it makes no sense, except unless he's going to move it to f4. Or maybe he's planning on moving f4 and pushing and opening up after he castles on the f file. So at this point, I moved my queen. Now I'm down 1.5. Now I moved my queen for a variety of reasons here, but going into them seems like kind of a waste of time. I'm overcovering the e6 pawn, and it's kind of a silly idea, isn't it? So now I move g6, But once again, shockingly, I'm only down 1.4. Now you notice in the Latvian, I'm practically down that all the time in the opening. So this is no worse than that according to the engine. Knight to c3. Now white's got practically ideal development. Black has nothing. He's got a bishop on e7 with no scope. Now we move our king, which strangely is the recommended new move by the machine. And we're only down 1.5 still. And why in the world would the machine want a4 to be played? Interesting idea. I guess, I don't know. I have very little explanation for that. Maybe he's trying to establish a knight out here on b5. And then he doesn't want me to be able to chase him away and chase the bishop as well. Okay. So now we're setting up for this check. If I ever want to move this knight on g8, the big bad check's coming on h6. So now it says I should move a6, which is apparently where all my counterplay is. But look at this. I am only one down in this ridiculous position, and white's fully developed except for that bad bishop he just gave himself back on c1, which isn't the worst bishop in the world. You know, we've seen people like Magnus Carlsen against Anish Giri play moves like that, queen to d2 in front of a bishop on c1. Why? We don't know. So now I go full bore with the strange move h5. In an attempt to develop my rook, believe it or not, I'm going to develop my knight to h6 and leave my rook there. I want to get the rook into the game. After all, his king's on the king side. So the computer now is beginning to think it's not the worst move in the world. Wants e5 to be played. So it also want a knight to pressure the pawn a little more. Now notice after f4 what's happening here. What's happening is the computer has given himself black square weaknesses. And so, in my opinion, there's not enough black square weaknesses around his king yet to warrant anything. However, I have nothing that I've moved. And moving the same piece twice, when I only have one piece that I've moved, one minor piece, is a violation of every principle, and yet the computer says it's the right move. So I move my knight. And he gives himself further black squared weaknesses. Now, amazingly, here I've got a knight on the rim, I've got a bishop that's got no scope, or it's about to get some scope, and because of his poor pawn structure on the king side, white is only up 3/4 of a point here. So now he gets the check, king down, and now the computer wants me to move c6, and I must admit, I was tempted to move c6. But I don't like the possibility of ever seeing a pawn on my d6. And even though their push wouldn't be like immediate, I think it's reinforceable with e5 and stuff, but apparently the computer doesn't mind playing that way. And now I move d6 and it says I'm slaughtered. So now that I've opened up the position a little bit for his bishops and going to give his knight a post on d5, I'm going to be down about 2. So computer says bad move. So pawn takes pawn. And now it says I shouldn't take back. I should just move knight to g4. However, I do take back. Now I'm down 2.5. And now let's see what happens. He moves f5, the crushing move. Interesting, this guy's getting all the good computer moves. Wonder what he's using. Hopefully nothing. So, I can't take that. What I want to do in this particular case, and this is a really interesting defensive idea, and you can learn from this a little bit, hopefully, and that is that I'm going to leave his pawn on g6, which provides a degree of protection for my king, because after all, you can't take your own pawn. And actually, I'd rather have his pawn in front of my king on g6 than my own pawn. So I'm just going to move my queen. Now it says he should move knight to f4, which is looking at a fork and going to completely destroy my position. So then I would probably be forced to take to prevent that knight from coming there, and we'll see whether he did. No, he just takes. See, and yet look, he's down 2.7, which is a winning game for almost anybody, especially a good player. And now I threaten a really ridiculous checkmate, as you see, on h2, which is easily defeated by simply moving the knight. And what happens? He moves a queen. So this is his first error. His error is he's moved a queen to f4. And now all of a sudden, instead of being up almost 3, he's up almost 1. And now I have to develop my final piece, which is begging to get out, and said I needed to move it to a6 to protect the c7 square, which I am aware I did think of doing that, but I'd rather have it on c6, because in this kind of game, if I don't checkmate my opponent or come very close to it, I'm going to lose, because I have all these structural weaknesses, I'm down on material. It's not a happy situation. And he says she should move knight to d5, which is a good move, but he takes my queen. Now, as you see, this is a blunder, depending on how I take back. You know, I could be tempted to take back with a knight, because after all, if he moves something like knight to a4, I would lose my mate threat if he took my knight on g4, because I'd have to do something with that bishop. And as soon as the g1 square is uncovered, the threat to my knight becomes rather difficult to deal with. So the correct way of taking this is the way I found right there, which is what I intended to begin with, allowing him to come to the 7th rank and win my c-pawn. So he was very tempted to do this, and did. And I noticed the computer says it's a good move, so I get rid of his pawn, and now I'm getting a little happier. Even though there's a rook on the 7th, all of a sudden, the person who had no development has better development. I've got connected rooks. He doesn't have connected rooks. You know, I've got advanced pieces controlling the middle and attacking his king. He doesn't. He's got that bad bishop. And that bad bishop can move to d2, and that's about it. You know, and so it blocks in his rook. And if he takes time now, which he has to, capturing a pawn or something, I have better development. And how did that happen exactly? Because I remember him having all his pieces developed except that bishop. Okay, so now rook on a to f8. That sounds like something I did. Okay. Now it says he's got to move his bishop out, bishop to d2. And for some reason, yeah, he did move bishop to d2. And now it said I should have checked. And as you can see, this person committed a disastrous blunder here. We have what is in effect an even game at this point, and he's going to mate himself. So this is what happens in 5-minute games. Even a player rated like close to 2100 makes an error eventually, and he's played a pretty good game so far. So what's ridiculous is the kind of game I've played. You know, I was looking at doubling on the f-file and various things like that, and letting him have the rest of my pawns, and it's an even game pretty much. He needs to cover his knight, so he goes there, and now it's mate. And the fact is that it was a ridiculous opening and an exercise in just plain survival in terms of defensive knowledge. And it worked. And I don't recommend anybody play this opening. It's completely unsound. And it required a blunder on my opponent's part and a few weak moves that gave me equality. Aside from that, there wasn't really a lot to criticize Black's play, aside from the hideous, horrible opening. And that's the end of this video. Hopefully I won't have to show you any more of these. Somebody probably knows what this is called.